Chapter 7 Thinking, Language, and Intelligence. First part of this video is about thinking. Now, what is thinking?
I believe thinking is a thought process.
I would describe thinking as the process of your brain retrieving stuff that you've already learned.
It's our, and this is just my belief, our God-given ability to process information.
Thinking is a process of the brain. It's like writing or talking only internally, something that the brain does.
Thinking is manipulation of mental representations of information. Basically, it's how our mind changes information to help us understand it better. There's different ways we think. One way we think is using mental images, which is basically things we see in our brain when someone mentions an object or an idea. In this case, a concept. And when we're talking about broader concepts, we usually think in terms of prototypes. Basically, a prototype is a typical, highly representative example of a concept that corresponds to our mental image of that concept. For example, when someone says the word dog, what kind of dog comes into your head? Whatever answer you give, that's the prototype, because that's the dog that first comes into your mind. Next, we're going to talk about algorithms and heuristics. Take me solving the Rubik's Cube, for example. I use a series of moves that guarantee that I'm going to get the same color on all sides. I'm using algorithms, which basically mean guaranteed success. Now, if you're going to cheat on a test, you might get caught, so it's not a guaranteed success. These are called heuristics. They might work.
Hey, is that cheating?
Or it might not. The next segment is on problem solving. There's two types of problems, well-defined and ill-defined problems. A well-defined problem is something like putting a picture frame on the wall. It's easy, and you don't really have to use much thinking for it. It's a problem with one concrete answer. An ill-defined problem would be like trying to get a baby to stop crying. You don't know what's wrong. There could be many things wrong with the baby. For this, you need to use heuristics to solve the problem, because it could have many solutions. There's arrangement problems like solving the Rubik's Cube. There's problems of inducing structure, like this analogy, for example. Sink is to bathroom, as hair is to head. And then there's transformation problems like the Tower of Hanoi puzzle. You have an initial point. There's steps that you need to take to get to the end point. In order to solve these problems, we use a variety of methods. Trial and error, for example. We can try and bake cookies until we get them just right. Or we can use a means-end analysis, where we make sub-goals to see where we are currently and compare that to where we need to get.
My ultimate goal is to get my PhD, but before that I have to get my master's, before that my bachelor's, before that my associate's, and before that I have to pass this class, and before that I have to get an A on this project.
That was a means-end analysis using sub-goals. Another way to solve problems is through insight. It's that one light bulb that comes above our head when we suddenly have the answers to everything. And after we get the answer, we need to evaluate the solution. If the answer is clear, then we know we've been successful. However, if there's no concrete solution, we need to evaluate the best answer using heuristics. The next segment is on different ways we think. What do you do with tissue paper?
You can wrap a present.
An answer like that is an example of functional fixedness, when we think of an object only with its typical use, not thinking outside the box. This is convergent thinking, which basically produces responses based on knowledge and logic. A broader form of functional fixedness is the mental set. This means that if something's worked in the past, I think it'll work again as well. For example, even if that door said push, I pulled on it because that's what I'm used to.
No, your hypothesis is wrong.
No, it's not. It's my hypothesis. It's definitely right.
This is another problem. It's called confirmation bias. It's the tendency to support your initial hypothesis without looking at opposing hypotheses. Some people come up with more creative solutions to problems. Creativity is the ability to generate original ideas or solve problems in novel ways. Two types of creativity is convergent thinking, as discussed before, and divergent thinking. Let's go back to that tissue paper example. What do you do with tissue paper?
You can wrap a present.
An answer like that is convergent thinking because you aren't thinking outside the box. Now what else can you do with tissue paper? Watch this. The ability to do unique things with non-unique items is an example of divergent thinking. Our next segment is about intelligence. Intelligence is the capacity to understand the world, think rationally, and use resources effectively when faced with challenges. One type of intelligence is fluid intelligence, our ability to reason and memorize, like solving this puzzle, for example. Another type of intelligence is crystallized intelligence. These are skills which are accumulated throughout our life. So basically, the older we are, the more crystallized intelligence we have. For example, I don't have the life experience to change a baby's diaper because I'm only 18. However, if an older person were to be faced with this challenge, they'd probably have a better time with it because they're older than me. Plus, I'm male and I don't change babies' diapers. A man named Howard Gardner once stated that there's 8 different intelligences we all have. They're bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, logical mathematic, naturalistic, intrapersonal, visual spatial, and verbal linguistic. Here are some examples of all these. Charles Darwin is naturalistic. Oprah Winfrey is interpersonal. This guy, Albert Einstein, is logical mathematical. Mozart is musical. Visual spatial, Pablo Picasso. Kobe Bryant is bodily kinesthetic. Plato was intrapersonal. And Charles Dickens, the author, is linguistic. Next, we're going to talk about practical intelligence, which is basically related to the overall success in living. Take this so-called businessman, for example. He uses practical intelligence to make sure his company thrives. But not really. As opposed to practical intelligence, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand other people's feelings. Dr. Phil does a good job with emotional intelligence because he has the ability to understand others' emotions. He has something called empathy. Next, I'm going to talk about common stereotypes people usually relate to the intellectually gifted. Now, people usually think the intellectually gifted are socially awkward, but science and research proves that that's the complete opposite. Intellectually gifted people are actually more sociable and more intelligent, obviously, than their less gifted peers. Take the research of Louis Terman, for example. Terman examined 1,500 children with IQ scores greater than 140 for their entire lives. He found that these children were more outgoing and socially capable than their other kids. And that concludes our video.